The sharp crash of iron against iron echoed through the workshop the moment Miguel Alvarez pushed open the double doors, striding in with heavy, determined steps. Helena Duarte stood beside the old yellow tractor, abandoned for years, gripping tightly the wrench that had once belonged to her late husband. At 39, she wore spotless blue coveralls. Her dark hair, tied back with a red bandana, stood out against the heavy silence in the room. 3 mechanics watched from a distance, arms crossed, waiting for her to fail. Miguel stopped just a few steps away, glanced at the lifeless machine, then at Helena, and smirked with disbelief, the kind of smile reserved for someone who doesn't stand a chance. "They say you think you can bring that scrap back to life," he muttered, pointing at the tractor. Helena took a deep breath, lifted her eyes without flinching, and replied with steel in her voice, "I don't think. I will. 2 hours a day after my shift, and we only talk about payment when that engine roars again. This tractor isn't even good for decoration," Miguel's voice echoed through the shop. He turned to the mechanics. "5 of you tried for 2 years. 5. Eddie has 20 years of experience. Jorge knows these tractors better than his own mother." He paused, looking back at Helena. "Mike has certifications that cost more than you make in 6 months." Silence, just the distant hum of fluorescent lights. Helena gripped the wrench tightly, the same one her husband Daniel had used for decades, cold metal against her palm. What she felt wasn't anger, it was something quieter, denser. "Mr. Alvarez," she said calmly, "if I dedicate a month, 2 hours a day, and try, if I can't fix it, I'll drop it." No questions asked. Miguel raised an eyebrow, glanced at Roberto Ramirez, the head mechanic and Helena's late husband's old friend, who watched silently, leaning against a workbench. Roberto just nodded slightly as if saying, "Let her try." 1 month! Miguel crossed his arms over his impeccable grey suit. "But I'm not paying anything for those extra 2 hours, and if it doesn't work by then, forget the whole thing. I'm not wasting the shop's electricity for you to—" He paused, choosing his word. "Play mechanic." Helena didn't look away. "Understood." Miguel shook his head, that smile still on his face. He turned to leave. Before crossing the threshold, he looked back one last time. That tractor cost $85,000, been sitting for 2 years. 5 experienced mechanics failed, but sure, he spread his arms theatrically. Maybe you've got something they don't. Muffled laughter from the 3 mechanics in the background. Not cruel laughter. Worse. She was used to it. Helena waited for Miguel to leave. She heard his footsteps fade away, heard the door close, then silence. She turned back, looked at the dusty yellow tractor sitting idle. 2 years without running. Stuck injection pump, according to Eddie. Damaged hydraulic system, according to Jorge. Compromised transmission, according to Mike. But Helena remembered her husband saying, "Eliminate the obvious, search for the invisible." She had 30 days, 2 hours a day, 60 hours to do what 5 men couldn't do in 2 years. She took a deep breath, walked to the tractor, touched the cold metal of the hood, and something happened that no one expected. This 39-year-old widow in blue coveralls, relegated to sanding parts and sweeping the shop floor, was about to do something that would change everything. Background: Daniel and Helena Duarte. Daniel Duarte had never been a rich man. He worked as a mechanic on a small farm in rural Texas for 25 years. He didn't earn much, just enough to provide for his family with dignity, but never more than that. What Daniel had wasn't money, it was respect. Deep respect from everyone who knew him, because Daniel understood tractors like few others. When Helena married him at 23, she was a secretary at the local grain mill. She knew nothing about mechanics. But after their daughter was born, little Sophia, and she became a stay-at-home mom, she started spending time in Daniel's workshop. At first, she just brought him lunch. Then she started watching him work. She couldn't explain why, but something about the way machines worked fascinated her, the logic of it, the problem-solving. Daniel never told her to leave. On the contrary, he patiently explained each step to her. "Tractors talk, Helena," he'd say, hands covered in grease as he adjusted a valve. "You just need to know how to listen, not with your ears, but with your mind." By the time she was 29, Helena was handing him tools without him even asking. She knew which one would come next just by watching what he was doing. By 31, she was helping with simple repairs, changing filters, tightening bolts, cleaning injectors. Daniel supervised everything, correcting when necessary, praising when she did it right. "Eliminate the obvious, search for the invisible," he'd repeat like a mantra. "If the engine won't start, don't jump to conclusions. Test the battery, test for fuel, test for air. Remove them one by one until only one thing remains. That thing is the problem." Then 5 years ago, tragedy struck. Little Sophia, who was 12 years old, died in a car accident. A drunk driver ran a red light. Their daughter never had a chance. The grief nearly destroyed them both. Helena stopped eating. Daniel stopped sleeping. For months they moved through life like ghosts. The only place they found any peace was in the workshop, working together side by side, fixing things. It was the only time the pain lessened. Machines made sense when nothing else did. They threw themselves into the work. Helena became as skilled as Daniel. They worked as a team, two people who understood each other without words. Then 3 years ago, Daniel got sick. Lung cancer. He'd smoked since he was 15, back when nobody knew how bad it was. 6 months from diagnosis to death. Helena was with him when it happened. His last words were simple: "You know more than you think, Helena. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Helena closed her eyes, gripping the wrench. She'd heard those words from his lips 3 years ago. Now, facing this impossible tractor, she needed to remember everything Daniel had taught her more than ever. Bar the owner, Miguel Alvarez. Miguel Alvarez hadn't always been the man with the sharp smile and crossed arms. There was a time when he laughed without irony, trusted without calculating. He inherited his father's ranch at 30 years old, 1,000 acres of fertile land in Texas, soybean farming as the main business. In 10 years, he built an empire, 3 ranches, state-of-the-art equipment, contracts with major distributors. By 40, Miguel Alvarez was one of the most respected landowners in the region, but professional success didn't fill the void left by Carmen's death. Carmen Alvarez, his wife of 14 years, a woman with an easy laugh, soft hands, and a gaze that disarmed him even when they argued. They married when Miguel was 28, she was 26. They never had children. They tried for years, but it wasn't meant to be. It brought them closer together. They built a life together without needing anyone else. Miguel remembered Carmen's words when he bought expensive equipment without consulting anyone. "The best employee isn't the most expensive one, Miguel," she'd say, sitting on the porch knitting. "It's the one who truly cares." He'd respond arrogantly, "Money buys quality, Carmen, always has." Carmen would look at him with that mixture of patience and sadness that only wives can have. Not always. Not always. Then, 15 years ago, Carmen got sick. Cancer. 6 months from diagnosis to death. Miguel spent fortunes on treatments, specialist doctors, private clinics. Nothing worked. Money doesn't buy time, doesn't buy health, doesn't buy life. Carmen died at 43 in the big house Miguel built for her. After that, Miguel filled the void with control. Control through money. Hire the best mechanics, best engineers, best workers. Pay well, demand more. If something breaks, call the most expensive specialist. If someone fails, replace them with someone with more certifications. That logic served him well for 15 years, until the $85,000 yellow tractor stopped working. The impossible tractor. 2 years ago, the tractor stopped working in the middle of harvest season. Miguel called Eddie, the best diesel engine mechanic in the region. Eddie diagnosed a damaged injection pump. 3 weeks of work, $2,000. The tractor wouldn't start. He called Jorge, a specialist in agricultural machinery. Jorge said the problem was the hydraulic system. 4 weeks, $3,500. The tractor still wouldn't run. He called Mike, a certified mechanical engineer. Mike recommended replacing the entire transmission. $8,000, 6 weeks. Nothing. Miguel spent over $20,000 on failed diagnoses. The tractor didn't move an inch. Finally, he left it abandoned in the shop. An $85,000 investment plus $20,000 in failed repairs turned into expensive, dusty decoration. And now a widow who cleaned parts and organized tools said she was going to try. Miguel walked to his office in the main house, removing his jacket. He poured himself a whiskey, looked out the window toward the shop in the distance. Carmen would have said something about giving her a chance, trusting people, not just titles. But Carmen had been dead for 15 years, and Miguel had learned that money, while it couldn't buy life, at least bought certainty. Or so he thought. Day 1. Getting started. The next morning, Helena arrived at the shop 30 minutes before her regular shift ended. The sun was already setting on the horizon when the other mechanics started leaving. Roberto approached, hands in his pockets. "You sure about this, Helena?" Helena nodded. "I'm sure, Roberto." Roberto looked at her with that mixture of pride and concern that only an old friend can have. "Your husband was good, real good. But that tractor," he sighed. "5 good men tried. It's not lack of skill. Sometimes machines just die." Helena smiled slightly. "Daniel said machines don't die. They just stop being heard." Roberto nodded slowly. He patted her shoulder. 2 hours, that's it. And if you need anything, holler." When Roberto left, Helena was alone in the shop. Silence, just the low hum of fluorescent lights. She walked toward the yellow tractor, made a slow circle around it, observing. Didn't touch anything yet, just looked. Hood closed, dusty, tires inflated properly. Solid structure, no visible damage. Someone had tried to keep it presentable even while it sat idle. Helena opened the door and climbed into the cab, sat in the driver's seat, put her hands on the steering wheel, closed her eyes, breathed deeply. Eliminate the obvious, search for the invisible. She got out and lifted the hood. The 6-cylinder diesel engine sat motionless, covered in a thin layer of dust. Helena took a clean cloth from her pocket, wiped the surface, examined for obvious signs, loose wires, cracked hoses, disconnected connections. Nothing. She went to the workbench, grabbed a voltmeter, returned to the tractor, connected the terminals to the battery. 12V, correct. Battery was good. Next step, fuel system. She checked, diesel tank half full. Opened the fuel filter bleed valve. Diesel came out clean, no air bubbles. Fuel was reaching. Next step, electrical system. She tested the starter motor, turned the key, the starter spun perfectly. Problem wasn't electrical. Helena stopped, breathed deeply. 3 systems eliminated. Battery, basic fuel system, electrical starter, all working. Mike, the youngest mechanic, appeared at the shop door, arms crossed, half smiling. "How's it going?" he asked casually, but with something else underneath. Helena didn't look up. "Fine." Mike approached, watching. "Eddie said it was the injection pump. Jorge said it was hydraulics. He shrugged. "Figured it was the transmission. Spent 6 weeks trying to fix it." Helena looked at him. "What did you try first?" Mike blinked. "First? Well..." He hesitated. "I went straight to the transmission. It's the most common thing in these models when they won't move." Helena nodded. "Did you try if the engine fires?" "Sure, it won't fire." "Did you check the battery?" "Of course, it's fine." "Fuel?" "Also fine." Helena returned to the engine. So the problem is between the fuel and the transmission. Mike looked at her, frowning. That's the entire power system. Exactly. Helena closed the hood. I'll continue tomorrow. Thanks, Mike. Mike stood there for a moment, not knowing what to say. Finally, he nodded and left. Helena looked at the clock. Exactly 2 hours. First night was over. She walked to her workbench, stored the voltmeter, washed her hands. She didn't know yet what was wrong, but she knew what wasn't wrong, and that, according to Daniel, was the first step. If you're enjoying Helena's journey, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps us share these stories of underdogs who prove everyone wrong. And seriously, drop a comment. Where are you watching from? We've got viewers from all over the world. Day 3. Miguel's visit. On the third day, Miguel showed up at the shop just as Helena was opening the tractor hood. It was 6 p.m. The sun cast long shadows on the concrete floor. 3 days, Miguel said, stopping 5 meters away. Any progress? Helena didn't look up. I'm eliminating causes, Miguel laughed. Not cruelly, just tiredly. You know how much I spent trying to fix that tractor? He approached, hands in his pockets. Over $20,000. And now you're telling me you're eliminating causes. Helena straightened her back, looking directly at him. Mr. Alvarez, if you want me to stop, I'll stop. But you gave me a month. I've been here 3 days. Miguel shook his head, bitter smile on his face. No, continue. But let me tell you something. Maybe it'll help you understand what you're dealing with. He approached the tractor, ran his hand over the dusty yellow metal. Eddie Ramirez was first. 25 years of experience with diesel engines, worked at Caterpillar for 10 years before coming here. I paid him $2,000 for 3 weeks of work. He diagnosed a damaged injection pump, dismantled the whole system, cleaned it, replaced it. Said he was certain. Miguel paused. Tractor wouldn't start. Helena listened in silence. Then I called Jorge Martinez, agricultural machinery specialist, international certification, been working with tractors since he was 18. He's 43 now. Paid him $3,500, 5 full weeks. Jorge said the problem was the hydraulic system. According to him, the pressure was all wrong. He changed valves, hoses, checked every connection. Miguel looked at Helena. Nothing. Tractor still wouldn't run. He walked to the window, looking at the soybean fields in the distance. Then I hired Mike Sanchez, mechanical engineer with a college degree, technical certifications that cost more than a new car. I paid him $8,000. He recommended replacing the entire transmission, 6 weeks of work, imported parts, everything new. He turned to Helena. You know what happened? Helena shook her head. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Miguel walked back to the tractor. Then I tried Carlos Diaz. 10 years working in the field, fixing tractors in sun, rain, mud. Practical man, no fancy titles, but real experience. I paid him $2,500 for 3 weeks. Carlos said the problem was electrical. He checked every wire, every connection, replaced the entire alternator. Miguel crossed his arms. Tractor didn't move an inch. Finally, Mike Lopez, the youngest on my team, but with certifications and updated knowledge, gave him 6 weeks. He analyzed absolutely everything, dismantled the engine almost completely, spent $5,000 on parts and diagnostics. Miguel looked directly at Helena. 6 weeks, $5,000, no results. Silence, just the hum of the lights. So, Miguel continued, voice lower, when you add it all up, Eddie, Jorge, Mike, Carlos, and the other Mike, 5 men. Combined experience of over 60 years, more than $20,000 spent, 2 years of trying. He moved closer to Helena, stopping just a step away. And you think you're going to find something they didn't? It wasn't a question, it was a statement. Helena held his gaze. I don't know if I'll find it, Mr. Alvarez, But I know that when 5 people search in the same place, the same way, and find nothing, maybe the problem is in a different direction. Miguel observed her for a long moment. Finally, he nodded slowly. 27 more days. Use your time wisely. He turned and left the shop. Helena took a deep breath, looked at the tractor. Eliminate the obvious. Search for the invisible. Tomorrow, she'd look where no one had looked. Day 4. Preparation. On the 4th day, Helena arrived with a clear plan. She'd spent the previous night thinking about what Daniel would have done. Daniel never touched a machine without prior preparation. Clean tools, organized space, complete mental plan. Before touching the tractor, Helena prepared her workbench. She cleaned the surface with a cloth, organized the tools in probable order of use. Daniel's wrench in the center, screwdrivers of different sizes to the left, adjustable wrenches to the right, a clean container for small parts, clean cloths folded in a stack. She went to the supply cabinet, looked for diesel system solvent, the only kind that worked for cleaning injectors without damaging seals. Found a half-empty can. Took it. Also grabbed an injector cleaning kit, brushes, thin wire, manual compressed air. Carlos, one of the more experienced mechanics, walked past her. Looked at the tools arranged on the table and frowned. "Why all this preparation?" he asked in a neutral tone, but with implicit doubt. Helena didn't look up. "My husband used to say, half the work is done before you even touch the machine." Carlos made a low sound in his throat. "Eddie prepared well too." "Jorge did. We all did." Helena finally looked at him. "Did they check the injection pump?" Carlos blinked. "Eddie did, yeah. He said it was damaged. Replaced it completely." "Did he open it?" "I don't know. I think so." Helena returned to her tools. "I'm going to open it completely, piece by piece." Carlos looked at her for a moment. Something changed in his expression. Less doubt, more curiosity. "If you need help lifting heavy parts, let me know. The pump on these tractors is pretty heavy." Helena nodded. "Thanks, Carlos." When Carlos left, Helena consulted her mental checklist. She needed to dismantle the entire injection pump. That meant disconnecting the fuel lines, loosening mounting bolts, removing the entire component without damaging the seals. Delicate work. 2 hours probably wouldn't be enough to finish everything in one day, but she could start. She opened the tractor hood. The 6-cylinder diesel engine sat motionless. Helena located the injection pump mounted on the right side of the block. Fuel line connections going in and out. 6 thin steel tubes running toward the injectors in each cylinder. She took a deep breath. Touched Daniel's wrench. Eliminate the obvious. Search for the invisible. The injection pump wasn't obvious. Eddie said he'd checked it, but had he looked inside? Had he cleaned all the internal valves, or had he just replaced it, assuming it was dead? Helena grabbed the adjustable wrench and began loosening the first fuel line with careful movements. The work had just begun. Day 5. The Discovery. On the 5th day, Helena finished dismantling the injection pump. It took her entire previous day's session just to disconnect the 6 fuel lines and loosen the 4 mounting bolts. The pump weighed more than she expected. Carlos kept his word. He appeared without Helena asking for help, held the part while she loosened the last bolt. "Still won't start." Carlos helped her set it carefully on the workbench. "Thanks." Helena wiped her hands with a cloth. Carlos looked at the pump, dark metal, signs of use, but looked perfectly fine on the outside. "Eddie said it was damaged. Replaced it with a new one. The new one didn't work either." Helena examined the pump under the lamplight. Maybe the problem wasn't the whole pump. Maybe it was something inside. Carlos crossed his arms, watching. "You gonna open it? I've never seen anyone open one of these. They're sealed. If you open it wrong, you'll ruin it." Helena nodded. "I know." Carlos stood there another moment, then left the shop without saying anything. Helena waited until she was alone, took Daniel's wrench and located the 6 bolts sealing the upper housing of the pump, began loosening them one by one in a cross pattern to avoid warping the metal. The last bolt resisted. Helena applied steady pressure. Finally heard a metallic click. She lifted the upper housing. The interior of the pump was revealed, and there it was. The pressure regulator valve in the center was completely stuck. Helena noticed immediately the valve stem wouldn't move. Normally this valve should move up and down with diesel pressure, but it was stuck as if welded in place. Helena touched the stem with a thin screwdriver. Didn't move an inch. She lifted the pump against the light, looked closer. At the base of the stem she could see a dark brown accumulation, residue from old diesel mixed with sediments. The valve hadn't moved in years, and the residue had cemented it in place. But that wasn't all. Helena checked one of the 6 injector outlet lines, disconnected it, and looked inside with a small flashlight. The internal channel was partially blocked. She did the same with the other 5 lines, all blocked to varying degrees. Sediments, microscopic metal particles, oxidized diesel. Helena straightened and looked at the tractor through the shop window. Eddie had said the pump was damaged. He replaced it, but didn't look inside the original. He just assumed if the pump externally didn't work, the whole pump was dead. Jorge had worked on the hydraulic system, but if diesel never reached the cylinders because the pump wasn't working, the hydraulics wouldn't matter. Mike checked the transmission, but without fuel reaching the engine, the transmission would never receive power. Everyone had worked on the symptoms. No one had discovered the root cause. Helena wiped her hands and looked at the clock. Exactly 2 hours. Session over. Cleaning would start tomorrow. But now she knew exactly what was wrong and how to fix it. Day 6 and 7. The cleaning. Helena submerged the stuck valve in pure diesel solvent. The clear liquid enveloped the metal, immediately beginning to dissolve the dark brown buildup, cementing the stem. While waiting for the solvent to work, she checked the 6 injectors. Each had a precision nozzle at the tip, microscopic channels through which diesel should spray in a fine jet to mix with air and ignite. Those holes were almost completely blocked by sediment. Helena grabbed the cleaning kit, extremely fine wire brushes designed specifically to avoid scratching the nozzles. She started with the first injector, passed the brush through the internal channel 10 times. Brown particles came out with each pass. Blue compressed air manually, checked with the flashlight. Still partially clogged. Repeated the process. 15 more passes. Air blown, checked. This time when she looked through the channel with light behind it, she could see clearly through to the other side. Clean. 1 injector done. 5 more to go. Roberto entered the shop. Helena hadn't heard him arrive. "How's it going, Helena?" Helena looked up. "Found the problem, Roberto." Roberto approached, examined the dismantled pump, the injectors, the valve submerged in solvent. "The regulator valve is stuck, and all 6 injectors are clogged." Roberto whistled softly. "Eddie didn't check this. He replaced the whole pump, didn't open the original." Roberto nodded slowly, understanding. So the new pump he installed probably had problems too, or maybe the dirty diesel ruined it quickly. Helena nodded. If the diesel has sediments and the pump is pumping it directly to new injectors, it damages them in a few weeks. Roberto sat on a nearby stool, watching Helena's work. "Your husband would have done exactly this. Daniel never replaced anything without checking inside first." Helena smiled slightly, not looking away from the second injector she was cleaning. "Daniel used to say, replacing parts without understanding is wasting money. He said it often." Roberto looked out the window toward the dark field. Daniel was special. He didn't have fancy certifications, hadn't gone to expensive technical schools, but he understood machines better than engineers with diplomas on the wall. Silence, just the sound of scraping against metal. "You know why I accepted you here when he asked me for work for you?" Roberto asked. Helena stopped cleaning and looked at him. Because you were friends. Roberto shook his head. We were acquaintances, not close friends. I accepted you because I saw Daniel work once at an agricultural fair. A John Deere tractor broke down in the middle of a demonstration. 3 mechanics tried to fix it for 2 hours. Couldn't do it. Daniel volunteered. They gave him 10 minutes. In 8 minutes, the tractor was running. Roberto looked directly at Helena. So I asked him how he did it. He said, "Eliminate the obvious. Search for the invisible." I never forgot those words. Helena felt pressure behind her eyes. Blinked quickly. She didn't know that story. Daniel was humble, too humble. He died without the recognition he deserved. Roberto stood and walked toward the door. But you have the chance to show that his method works, to give him the credit he never got. He stopped at the door, turned back. Finish this, Helena, not just for you, but for Daniel. When Roberto left, Helena looked at Daniel's wrench on the table, then at the 5 remaining injectors that needed cleaning. She grabbed the second one and began cleaning it with renewed determination. Daniel had taught her the right method. Now she'd prove it. Day 7 continued reassembly. By the 7th day, Helena had all the parts cleaned. The regulator valve finally broke free after 2 days submerged in solvent. The stem now moved smoothly up and down. All 6 injectors were completely clean. Internal channels clear when checked with light, but cleaning was only half the work. Reassembling it correctly was the other half. Helena placed the clean valve back in its housing inside the pump, checked that it moved freely. Smooth movement, no resistance. Perfect. She took the upper housing of the pump. Before sealing it, she checked the rubber gasket. It was slightly hardened by time, but still usable. She cleaned it carefully, making sure it contained no particles that could cause leaks. She placed the upper cover on the pump, inserted the 6 bolts, tightening them first by hand to ensure correct alignment. Then she grabbed Daniel's wrench. Daniel had taught her that torque was important. Too tight and the metal would warp. Too loose and leaks would develop. Precision was needed. Helena didn't have a calibrated torque wrench like Eddie had. She only had Daniel's wrench and the feel that came from tightening thousands of bolts over decades. She started with the first bolt, tightened it until she felt initial resistance, then another half turn, firm but without forcing. Second bolt, same process, half turn after finding resistance, worked in a cross pattern, not in a circle, alternating opposite sides to distribute pressure evenly. Mike appeared at the shop door, stood there watching without saying a word. Helena noticed but didn't stop. 4th bolt, 5th, 6th. When she finished, she checked visually. All 6 bolts were at the same depth level, a sign the torque was even. Mike finally spoke. "You know what torque those bolts need?" Helena didn't look up. 40 foot-pounds. How do you know without a torque wrench? Helena placed the wrench on the table. My husband taught me to feel it. I learned by tightening hundreds of bolts with him, first with a torque wrench, then without it, until my hands learned the difference. Mike approached, examining the rebuilt pump more closely. Eddie used a calibrated torque wrench, so did I. Helena began reinstalling the 6 clean injectors in their corresponding places. Did they clean the injectors before installing them? Mike fell silent. Helena continued working, inserted the first injector, tightened the retaining nut. Second injector, third. We spent weeks, Mike said finally, voice quieter. Weeks, and it was this, a stuck valve, dirty injectors. Helena connected the last fuel line. Sometimes the simple thing is the right thing. Mike watched another moment, then nodded slowly. I hope it works. Me too. Helena wiped her hands. We'll know tomorrow. When Mike left, Helena stepped back and looked at the fully reassembled injection pump, ready for reinstallation in the engine. Everything was clean. Everything was properly tightened. Everything was ready. But a small doubt persisted in the back of her mind. What if this wasn't enough? What if there was something else? She shook her head. Trust the method. Trust Daniel's teachings. Tomorrow, the truth would be revealed. Hey folks, if you're still with us, that's awesome. Helena's about to face the ultimate test. Before we see if that tractor roars to life, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell. We post these underdog mechanic stories every week, and seriously, drop a comment. Where are you watching from? New York? California? London? Tokyo? We love hearing from you. Day 8. The Moment of Truth. On the 8th day, Helena reinstalled the injection pump in the engine. Carlos helped her lift the heavy component while she tightened the 4 mounting bolts. She reconnected the 6 fuel lines one by one, checked each connection twice. It was 6:30 p.m. The sun was beginning to set. Helena had an hour and a half before her 2 allocated hours ended. Roberto was in the shop watching from his workbench. Eddie, Jorge, Mike and Carlos also stayed. They didn't say they were there to watch the failure. They just stayed. Miguel Alvarez appeared at the door, impeccable grey suit, enigmatic expression. 8th day, he said, looking at the tractor. Ready to test. Helena wiped her hands with a cloth. Yes, Mr. Alvarez. Miguel crossed his arms. 22 more days in your deadline, but go ahead. Let's try now. Helena climbed into the tractor cab, sat in the driver's seat, put her hands on the steering wheel, breathed deeply, inserted the key, turned it. The starter spun once, twice, 3 times. The engine coughed, almost caught. The engine caught, then died. Helena tried again. The starter spun. The engine coughed again, vibrated, and died. Silence. Helena looked through the windshield, saw Miguel shake his head slowly, saw Eddie look at the ground, saw Mike cross his arms. She got out of the cab and walked toward Roberto. Her godfather looked at her with concern. Helena, Roberto said softly, maybe you should. The system needs bleeding, Helena interrupted. Her voice was firm, though her heart was racing. Roberto blinked. What? Diesel systems. When fuel lines are disconnected, air gets in. Air doesn't compress like diesel. A diesel engine won't fire with air in the system. You need to bleed the system. Miguel approached. Eddie bled the system when he replaced the pump. Helena looked directly at him. Eddie replaced the pump. I cleaned and reassembled it. It's different. I need to eliminate the air that entered when I reconnected the lines. Miguel studied her face. Searched for doubt, for excuses. Found none. How long does bleeding take? 5 minutes, maybe 10? Miguel looked at his watch. You have 15 minutes before your time is up today, if it doesn't work by then. He left the sentence incomplete. Helena nodded and went to the back of the tractor. Located the bleed valve on the fuel return line, loosened the screw half a turn. Diesel began to leak out, first with air bubbles, then without bubbles. She tightened the screw, went to each of the 6 injectors, loosened each line nut slightly. Diesel leaked out, bubbles came out. When the diesel ran clean, she tightened again. 6 injectors bled. System completely purged. 10 minutes had passed. She climbed back into the cab. Hands on the steering wheel, key in the ignition. She remembered Daniel. Machines don't lie. If you pay attention, they'll tell you exactly what's wrong. She turned the key. The starter spun. The engine coughed once, twice, and then roared. Not a weak start. A complete, deep, powerful roar. The 6-cylinder diesel engine, after 2 years of silence, suddenly came to life. Dense black smoke came from the exhaust for 3 seconds. Old fuel burning. Then the smoke turned light grey. Helena kept the engine at idle. She heard no knocking, no abnormal vibrations, just the steady purr of a well-tuned engine. She looked through the window. Eddie's mouth was open. Jorge had taken off his cap, holding it against his chest. Mike shook his head but smiled. Carlos clapped once, then again, then continued. Roberto had his eyes shining. He raised his fist in a victory sign. Miguel Alvarez had remained completely still. 10 meters away, expression unreadable, but something had changed in his eyes. Helena climbed down from the tractor. The engine was still running, strong, stable, alive. She walked toward Miguel, stopped 3 steps away. 8 days, she said, voice calm. $65 in solvent and cleaning materials. 16 hours of work. Miguel looked at her. For the first time since Helena had known him, there was no sharp smile, no contempt, just respect. It works, he finally said, voice hoarse. After 2 years, 5 mechanics, $20,000, and you... He paused. You did it. Helena nodded. My husband taught me. Eliminate the obvious. Search for the invisible. Miguel looked toward the tractor. The engine kept purring. $85,000 that had died. Now it lives. He turned back to Helena. I need to talk to you tomorrow. In my office, after your regular shift. He turned and left the shop. The 5 mechanics surrounded Helena. Roberto hugged her. Eddie extended his hand. Helena shook it. I didn't know, Eddie said, shaking his head. Didn't know you could clean it like that. I always just replaced it. Now you know, Helena smiled. When everyone left, Helena was alone in the shop. The tractor engine was still running. She let it run for 5 more minutes, then shut it off. Silence. But it was a different silence, not of defeat but of possibility. Helena touched Daniel's wrench. I did it, Daniel. I did it. The next day, the offer. The next day, Helena arrived at the shop at 5 a.m. Her regular shift started at 6, but she wanted to see the tractor one more time before everyone arrived. She opened the shop door. The fluorescent lights flickered before reaching full brightness. The tractor sat where she'd left it, silent, but no longer a dead machine. Helena entered the cab, turned the key. The engine caught on the first try, deep, steady roar. No hesitation, she let the engine idle for 5 minutes. Listened to every sound. No knocking, no abnormal vibrations, just the steady purr of a well-tuned diesel engine. Roberto entered the shop at 6:10, saw Helena in the cab, the engine running. How long has it been running? He asked, approaching. 10 minutes. Helena got out of the cab. I wanted to be sure. Roberto walked around the tractor, observed the exhaust. Light grey smoke, almost clear, sign of clean combustion. $85,000, 2 years out of service, and you got it running in 8 days. Helena wiped her hands on a cloth. Daniel taught me. Daniel would be proud. Eddie arrived at 6:20, stopped at the shop door, listening to the engine, walked slowly toward the tractor, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. It works, he said. Really works. Really does, Helena confirmed. Jorge arrived soon after. Mike and Carlos followed. The 5 mechanics gathered around the tractor. Yesterday, I thought you'd failed, Mike said. When it didn't start the first time, I thought it was impossible. Me too, Helena admitted, but I remembered that diesel systems need bleeding after lines are disconnected. Daniel taught me that. Eddie approached Helena. 25 years working with engines, he said. Voice not defensive, just honest. And I never opened an injection pump to clean it. I always replaced the whole part. It's faster to replace, Helena said, but not always right. Eddie extended his hand. I learned something from you. Thank you. Helena shook his hand. Jorge stepped forward. Your husband, what was his name? Daniel Duarte. Jorge nodded slowly. I'll remember that name. A true master, though he probably never got the recognition he deserved. Carlos put his hand on Helena's shoulder. When my son asks me what I learned this week, I'll tell him that real knowledge isn't just about certificates. It's about paying attention and thinking differently. Roberto watched from the back of the shop, saying nothing, but Helena saw his eyes shine. At 7 a.m., Miguel Alvarez entered the shop. Impeccable grey suit, serious expression. Helena, my office, now! The mechanics exchanged glances. Helena wiped her hands and followed Miguel. The recognition had begun, but the real transformation was yet to come. The office meeting. Miguel's office was on the second floor of the main house. Large windows overlooking the fields, dark wood desk, framed diplomas and photos with politicians and businessmen decorated the walls. Helena sat in the chair facing the desk. Miguel stood by the window looking out. Silence for 30 seconds. Finally, Miguel spoke without turning around. 2 years ago, when Roberto asked me to hire you, I said no. He said you were good. I responded that I didn't hire women for technical work. He paused. Roberto insisted, said your husband had been the best mechanic he'd ever known. I told him that didn't matter, that you weren't your husband. Finally, I accepted, but only as an assistant. Simple tasks, nothing technical. He turned to Helena. For the first time, she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Shame. I spent $20,000 trying to fix that tractor, hired 5 professionals with certificates, experience, reputation. Everyone failed, and you, whom I relegated to cleaning tools and sweeping the floor, you solved it in 8 days with $65. Miguel walked to his desk, opened a drawer, took out an envelope. $500. I'm paying you for the 16 hours you worked outside your regular shift at $30 an hour. That's what I would have paid Eddie. He placed the money on the desk. But that's not enough. Money doesn't compensate for what I did, doesn't compensate for 2 years of underestimating you, doesn't make up for assuming that just because you're a woman, you couldn't do technical work. Helena picked up the envelope, didn't open it, just held it. Miguel sat in his chair. He suddenly looked tired, older. My wife, Carmen, died 15 years ago. Before she died, she told me something. She said, "The best employee isn't the most expensive one, Miguel. It's the one who truly cares." I responded that money buys quality. She shook her head. She was disappointed in me. He looked directly at Helena. Carmen was right. I was wrong, and I've been wrong for 15 years, filling the void she left with arrogance and control. He stood. I'm going to gather everyone in the shop now. I want to say this publicly. What I owe you isn't just to you. It's to everyone who's worked here these past 2 years, watching me underestimate you. He left the office. Helena followed. 30 workers gathered in the shop. Miguel stood in the center, Helena beside him. The 5 mechanics at the front. Miguel spoke with a clear voice. Helena Duarte fixed the tractor that 5 professionals couldn't fix. But this isn't just about the tractor. It's about how I treated her for 2 years. I hired her because Roberto insisted, but I never gave her a chance to show what she knew. I assigned her to simple tasks because I assumed that being a woman, she wasn't capable of technical work. He paused, letting the words settle. I was wrong. Completely wrong. And not just about Helena, but about all of you. I thought money bought competence. I thought certificates and experience were the only things that mattered. I thought controlling everything was the only path to success. He looked at Helena. She showed me I was wrong. Her husband taught her something I'd forgotten, that real knowledge comes from paying attention, thinking differently, not giving up. He addressed everyone. From today, Helena is free to work on any repair she wants, and any disrespect toward her will be answered directly to me. Understood? Silence. Then Roberto started clapping. Eddie joined him. Jorge, Mike, Carlos. All 30 workers. Helena felt pressure behind her eyes, blinked quickly. Miguel extended his hand. She shook it. 6 months later. 6 months after the tractor roared to life for the first time, Helena arrived at the shop at 5:30 a.m. as always, but no longer as an assistant, as an official mechanic, and for 3 months as interim head mechanic while Roberto prepared for his retirement. The shop had changed. Tools were better organized. There was a new workbench for Anna, a 22-year-old woman Miguel had hired 3 months ago. On the wall, Roberto had hung a simple wooden plaque with carved words: "Eliminate the obvious. Search for the invisible." Daniel Duarte. Helena touched the plaque every morning before starting. Silent ritual, a connection with Daniel. Anna arrived at 6. In 6 months, she'd learned fast. Could already do basic repairs on her own, changing injectors, fuel pumps, simple electrical systems. Helena was supervising, but fewer corrections were needed each time. "Morning, Anna." She hung up her jacket. "Ready to show me transmissions today?" Helena smiled. "Ready." Eddie joined them shortly after. Now he worked more collaboratively with Helena, asking for her opinions, sharing techniques. The quiet arrogance he used to have was gone. "Helena, I've got a tractor with a starting problem. Can you take a look with me?" "Sure." They worked together for 2 hours. Eddie diagnosed a weak battery. Helena confirmed, but also suggested checking the alternator. They did. The alternator had a loose connection. Eddie nodded, smiling. "I wouldn't have caught that without your suggestion. That's why we work as a team." At noon, Miguel visited the shop. Now he came regularly, not supervising with suspicion, but to learn. He asked questions, listened to answers. He'd visibly changed in 6 months. Less rigid, more human. "How's it going, Anna?" he asked. "Very well." Helena wiped her hands. "In 6 months, she'll be ready to work alone on simpler cases." Miguel nodded. "Great. And I want to ask you something." Another woman applied, Maria Lopez. Experience in welding. You think we should hire her? Helena looked at him. 6 months ago, Miguel would never have asked. He would have decided on his own. If she has the skills, yes. Then we'll hire her. Miguel looked around the shop. This place has changed, not just the tools, but the whole atmosphere. People work better when they feel respected. Your husband would have said that. Helena smiled. He said it many times. Miguel left. Helena returned to work. That night, before leaving, Helena stood alone in the shop. She looked at Daniel's wrench on the table, picked it up, cold metal, worn by decades of use. She thought about everything that had changed. The tractor worked perfectly, used daily without problems. She was head mechanic. Anna was learning. Miguel had changed. Eddie, Jorge, Mike, Carlos all worked differently now, more collaboratively, less arrogantly, and Daniel Duarte's name, which never got official recognition in life, was now engraved on a plaque on the shop wall, where 30 people saw it every day. Helena closed her eyes. She could hear Daniel's voice, not imagination. Real memory. Machines don't lie, Helena. If you pay attention, they'll tell you exactly what's wrong. She opened her eyes, looked at the plaque on the wall. I did it, Daniel. I didn't just fix the tractor. I shared what you taught me, and it'll live forever. She turned off the lights, left the shop. The knowledge continued, and would continue forever. Well, folks, that's Helena's story, a 39-year-old widow in the 1970s who proved that skill, patience, and attention to detail matter more than fancy certificates. If this story inspired you, please hit that subscribe button and smash that notification bell. We share stories like this every week, real mechanics, real underdogs, real victories. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Are you from Texas like Helena? Or maybe you're tuning in from across the ocean. We love hearing from our community all over the world. And if you know someone who's been underestimated, who's fighting to prove themselves in a male-dominated field, or who just loves a good underdog story, share this video with them. Remember, eliminate the obvious, search for the invisible. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.